Today we're going to introduce you. So one of the lively pastor, Jim. So Jim, thank you very much for coming to our studio. So Jim, I'm going to ask you a very interesting question.
Okay.
So there are so many professions in the world.
Yes.
So being so young, so why did you choose to be a pastor?
That's a really good question. I grew up in a church. From the day I was born, I was part of the church, and I grew to love it. But my father was a baker, and he owned this great little bakery in Ontario, and I was going to grow up to be one of the best bakers in the world. Worked for Robin Hood, but I loved church, and there was just something in my heart that just kept on saying, go this direction, leave the bakery behind. And so I pursued it. I always loved the church, I always got involved, and so I just kept on moving and advancing. I went to school and developed, and I just loved church. And maybe it's not so much I love church, I love people. And I love seeing people changed by the power of God. And seeing how people move out of a state of darkness into a place of light and newness. And that's part of why I love being a pastor.
And would you also not mind just telling us that how long you've been doing it?
I've been doing it for about 15 years. In between, I was selling some flowers for a local nursery over here. But I came out to BC from Ontario and worked in a couple of churches, and now I'm at the third church called Pacific Community Church in Cloverdale. So I've been at it for a little bit. Just a young one, though, at it, still learning my way.
And would you like to share with us the most challenging time in your last 15 years?
That's there is one. We have a family in our church, a great family. Our church is 15 years old, and they came very early on, even before I was pastor here at this church. And a wonderful family. He had a great son named Brandon, and this couple was looking towards the day. He was a great business entrepreneur, and he just sold his business, and he bought an RV, and his son was about to graduate, and they were going to travel the world, North America together for a year, and going to fly to Hawaii where the dad had grown up. And then one day, as Brandon was biking to school, he got hit by a truck. And I remember Pastor and I from the church, we rushed to the hospital, and the whole family was gathered, and Brandon was still alive, but really beat up. And so we spent 20 hours with the family, and walked with them as the situation became more desperate. And the family gathered to say goodbye to Brandon, and life support was pulled, and so his life was passed. That was a challenging time. As parents who really loved their son and a son who really loved them, it was an obvious, real relationship. And for them to part this way was really hard. It was also wonderful. I mean, I think that's the mystery of life, where at the most desperate times can be also some of the most wonderful and beautiful times. And I remember the memorial service. 900 people came out from the school, and friends and family. And Brandon's father stood up to speak. And he spoke with such grace and strength. And he inspired people towards life. Because Brandon's father was one who loved the Lord. Certainly grieving. Can't answer all the questions about why. But he had a trust and a foundation. And he had given it to Brandon too. And he read a letter that he had found in Brandon's room as he was cleaning up his room. And it was a scribbled note. And it said something like this: I, Brandon, from this day forward, choose to follow God. I don't care what anybody thinks, but I'm going to live my life for God. It was something like that, and he dated it. That little note is now sort of hanging on our walls in the church as an indication of one who just wants to serve God. And hopefully inspires people to live passionately for God. So that's really a beautiful connection to what I want to do. But it certainly was an occasion where it was most challenging, but yet beautiful.
And can you also share with us the most happiest moment that recently happened in your life?
Oh, that's an easy one. I married for 19 years, and I was the first one married in my family. I have two other brothers and a sister, and I beat them all to the line of getting married. But they all beat me to the line of having children. And it wasn't until 15 years into our marriage, and we had always wanted kids, and it just didn't seem to be happening. And Eric James arrived, and he's now 3 years old, and on his way to 4. And then in the past year, we received little Ian Justin. And yes, thank you. And so, Aaron, thank you very much. And so he's, both of these boys are just full of smiles, and they have just added to our life. And if you're a parent, you probably know the blessing of that. And so that definitely stands out as one of the very joyous moments. And so Christmas is going to be pretty meaningful for us as we get to enjoy the sense of a family at Christmas.
And especially, nowadays you see, these stores are packed.
Yes.
Everybody's buying and gift wrap and gifts. Season of giving.
Mm-hmm.
So, but would you share with our viewers what's the true meaning of Christmas?
Well, it reminds me of, your question reminds me of a little story of a guy that was looking for the true meaning of Christmas and, looking for a book to explain it. And so he walked into a bookstore, and he was looking all over. What is the meaning of Christmas? And couldn't find anything. He goes to the cashier and asks the question, where's a book, a good book, just explaining what Christmas is all about? And she sort of looked around, and then finally it dawned on her where it was. And she took him to one of the back shelves, and on the bottom shelf, she says, here's a book that tells you all about Christmas. And I think that's probably the way it is for most people. Just as this cashier said to him, we had to, get all kinds of people shopping, putting everything on the shelves, and so everything, the meaning is hidden underneath. And I think a lot of people don't really get what Christmas is all about. We got all the lights and all the presents and making the perfect experience for the family, and there's a lot of anxiety, which is so contrary to the message of Christmas. Because when Jesus was born 2,000 years ago, the angels came and said, peace on earth. And they were pointing towards Jesus, who was the hope of many generations before. And this baby born outside of any hospitality was going to be the hope of the world. And just knowing who this Jesus is, what he's about, how he lived, well, we know it's changed the world, but it can change everybody's life. And the heart of that change is peace. A peace that comes through the way of love.